You like people. In theory. In individual doses, in the right context, with the right amount of prior warning and a clear exit strategy, you can genuinely enjoy them. But in practice, something happens. The closer someone gets, the more you notice. The ways they might disappoint. The version of you they're seeing versus the one that actually exists. The gap between what they're saying and what they might mean. The history you don't have with them yet, and the ways that history might eventually hurt. And so you keep a distance, not rudely, not obviously, with warmth and humor and a social fluency that looks, from the outside, like someone who is perfectly comfortable with people. But from the inside, a careful, constant, exhausting management of how close anyone is allowed to get. You've called this introversion, selectivity, having high standards for the people you let in. All of those things might be true. But underneath them, quieter, older, less comfortable to name, there might be something else. Welcome to Thought Paradox. Today we're talking about the thing that looks like not liking people, but is actually something far more specific than that. The quiet, persistent, deeply human difficulty of trusting them. Let's make the distinction clearly, because it matters enormously. Not liking people is a preference. Not trusting them is a wound. And treating a wound like a preference means never addressing what's actually there. People who genuinely don't like people, misanthropes in the true sense, tend to be consistent, uninterested across the board, not particularly disappointed by humanity because they didn't expect much from it to begin with. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the person who wants connection, genuinely, deeply wants it, but finds themselves unable to fully enter it, who likes individuals but stays guarded with them, who values people in the abstract but keeps them at arm's length in practice, who experiences warmth toward people regularly but doesn't let that warmth translate into the kind of closeness that would require real trust. That's not misanthropy. That's a nervous system that learned, through real experience, that people are capable of causing a specific kind of pain, and that decided, quietly, without a formal announcement, to reduce exposure to that risk. You don't hate people. You just haven't found a way to fully believe in them yet. Trust doesn't usually shatter in a single moment. Sometimes it does. A betrayal so specific and so complete that the before and after are clearly defined. But more often, the erosion is gradual, accumulated, built from smaller moments that individually seemed survivable. The early lessons. Trust is learned in the earliest relationships. A caregiver who was reliable, responsive, and consistently available teaches the nervous system a foundational lesson. People can be counted on. When I need something, it will be there. A caregiver who was unpredictable, present sometimes and absent others, warm one day and cold the next, teaches a different lesson. People are uncertain. Availability is not guaranteed. Counting on someone is a risk. That lesson doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive as a thought or a decision. It arrives as a felt sense, a background orientation toward other people that colors every relationship that follows. And it doesn't update automatically, the way we might hope it would, when better people arrive. It has to be consciously, patiently, deliberately revised. The specific betrayals. And then there are the particular moments. The friend who shared something told in confidence. The partner who left in the way that felt like proof of something. The person whose face changed when they found out something true about you. The group that closed ranks in a way that made the exclusion feel like information about your worth. Each one of these leaves a specific residue, not just about that person,
about people, about what can be expected, about what it costs to be seen, about the gap between how people present and what they're actually capable of. And the residue compounds, becomes policy, becomes the default orientation that the next person has to work against before they've done anything wrong. The exhaustion of being read wrong. For many people, particularly those who think deeply, feel intensely, and communicate with nuance, there's a specific trust erosion that comes from chronic misreading. Being understood shallowly, being responded to as if you said something simpler than what you said, being known by people who have a version of you in their heads that doesn't match the actual one. Over time, this produces a fatigue with the entire project of being known. What's the point of trying to be understood accurately if the understanding never quite arrives? And so, they stop trying. Not loudly, just quietly, performing connection while keeping the real self somewhere private and protected.
Because it doesn't feel like distrust most of the time. It feels like clarity. It feels like noticing more than other people. You see the inconsistencies, the small contradictions between what someone says and what they do, the micro-expression that doesn't match the words, the pattern that's only visible if you've been paying the kind of attention most people aren't paying. And you file these things, not to build a case, not consciously, but because your nervous system has learned that the details matter, that the signals you catch early are the ones that tell you what's coming. It feels like being careful, not cold, not unfriendly, just deliberate about who gets access to what. You have layers. The social layer that almost everyone sees, the warmer layer that some people reach, the honest layer that very few have ever been given access to, and the core, the actual interior, which may have never been fully shown to anyone. And that layering feels like wisdom, like appropriate selectivity, like the reasonable response of someone who has learned that not everyone deserves the full version. It feels like exhaustion after connection. The conversation was good, the person was genuine, nothing went wrong, and you come home and need hours alone. Not because you're introverted necessarily, though you might be, but because holding the managed version of yourself in place for the duration of the interaction costs something. And the cost only becomes visible when you can finally put it down. It feels like waiting for the other shoe, even with the people you've decided to trust, even in the relationships that have given you no real reason for fear. A background awareness that this could change, that people surprise you, that the trust you've extended is an advance against a future that hasn't been written yet. Not paranoia, just vigilance that never fully rests. The cost is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself as loneliness. It doesn't arrive as crisis. It arrives as distance. In relationships that are warm but not deep, in friendships that are real but not complete, in the persistent low-grade sense of being beside people rather than with them. It costs you the relief of being known, the specific exhale of a moment where you said something true and it landed correctly, where you didn't have to manage the impression, where the person on the other side saw something real and stayed with it. That relief is available, but only to the person who risks being seen. And the person who doesn't trust people doesn't risk being seen. So the relief never comes. It costs you other people's trust, because trust is reciprocal. The person who stays carefully managed, who never quite shows their hand, who holds something back in every interaction, is felt by the people around them. Not always consciously, but as a kind of glass between themselves and the other person. And after enough of that, people stop trying to reach through it. Not out of frustration,
just out of the quiet conclusion that the full version of this person isn't available. And so, the very outcome the distrust was designed to prevent, the loss of closeness, gets produced by the strategy meant to protect against it.
Trust doesn't rebuild through deciding to trust. If it did, this would be a much shorter video. Trust rebuilds through accumulated experience of being trusted and surviving it, of extending something real and having it received well enough, of staying in the relationship past the point where the familiar alarm bells fire, and discovering that this time, the alarm was wrong. That's not a technique, it's a process, and it's slow in proportion to how long the original lesson took to install. The first move is identifying the specific fear, not the general "I don't trust people," the specific version. I don't trust people to stay when they see the difficult parts. I don't trust people to mean what they say over time. I don't trust people to hold what I tell them carefully. I don't trust people not to leave in the way that feels like confirmation of something. Each of those is a different fear, with a different origin, and a different kind of evidence that would begin to revise it. Naming the specific version of the distrust is the first step toward addressing it, rather than just managing around it. The second move is risking something small. Not the full interior, not the most vulnerable truth, not a leap of faith that bypasses every reasonable caution. One brick. One thing slightly more honest than usual. One moment of staying present past the point where you'd normally deflect. One conversation that goes somewhere slightly more real than the surface. And watching what happens. Not with the expectation that it will go perfectly, but with the genuine openness to letting the result be data. Data that might, over time, begin to revise the lesson the nervous system learned a long time ago. The third move is therapy for the original wound. Because the distrust that lives at the deepest level, the one that was installed before language, before memory, before you had any way to evaluate it, that one doesn't update through relationship experience alone. It needs to be worked with directly. In a relationship that is specifically designed to be safe, consistent, and attuned. One where the nervous system gets to practice trust in a controlled environment and build the evidence base it needs to begin to believe. You don't hate people. You've loved people deeply, with the full force of a capacity for connection that is, if anything, larger than average. You've just been hurt by them in ways that left something behind, a lesson, a residue, a background orientation that says, quietly, persistently, in a voice that sounds like wisdom but is actually fear. Be careful. Keep some back. Don't let anyone all the way in. That voice has protected you, and it has also, without meaning to, kept you from something essential. The particular relief of being with someone, really with them, without managing the distance, without holding something back, without waiting for the shoe to drop. The experience of being in a room with someone and feeling, for once, like you don't have to be careful. That experience is available. Not with everyone, not without discernment, not by deciding to trust people you have real reasons not to trust, but with the right person, in the right relationship, built slowly, from the evidence up, one honest moment at a time. You are not someone who doesn't need people. You are someone who needed them enough to be hurt by them, and hurt enough to build something that would make sure it couldn't happen again. That's not a character flaw. That's a human being doing the only thing they knew how to do with pain that had nowhere else to go. The question isn't whether you trust people. The question is whether you're willing to find out. One carefully chosen person, one slightly more honest moment at a time. What happens when you let them try? I'm Thought Paradox. If this names something you've been living with quietly for a long time, share it with someone who needed to hear it too. See you in the next one.